Live Network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. I'm Ben Hall. Interesting topic tonight. We're talking about one of these bills in the legislature that you might think is not needed in Tennessee, but it is getting a lot of attention, and it's quite interesting. We're talking about corporal punishment. And the question is, of course, corporal punishment is paddling. Should paddling, corporal punishment, be banned on students with disabilities? Reports have discovered that the majority of students, or in places where they do paddling and corporal punishment, the majority of students who receive it are in fact disabled. So there's a bill going before the legislature right now that would ban that. Happy to have with us Carrie Hobbs-Guyton, Executive Director of the ARC, Tennessee. You have helped write this bill that's moving through the legislature that, again, would ban corporal punishment for students with disabilities. Again, I guess my first question is, how prevalent is corporal punishment in Tennessee?
Well, right now in Tennessee, 148 school districts exist, and 109 of them allow corporal punishment or have a policy related to corporal punishment. So
the vast majority?
Yes.
Now, we're not talking about Davidson County does not, Murfreesboro does not, some of the larger cities do not, but we're primarily talking about, I guess, East Tennessee and some of the rural districts, right?
Yes, though specific to Murfreesboro City Schools does not allow corporal punishment, but Rutherford County does. So if you live in Rutherford County and you're not in Murfreesboro, it's a completely different policy.
What made you start looking into this? How did you become concerned?
So we actually saw the bill. We track legislation as part of what we do at the ARC Tennessee, and we also have a coalition called the Disability Coalition on Education, which was a large group of advocacy organizations and family members and self-advocates that pay attention to education legislation. And so as bills started coming out at the beginning of session, we came across this piece of legislation and we thought, wow, this could be a really good thing. And so I talked it over with the members of our coalition, and then we made appointments to go see Representative Jason Powell, who was the sponsor on the House side, to talk to him a little bit about it and sort of see where it had come from and things like that. And we were confident at that point that it was coming from a good place, and we liked the first iteration of the bill. Wasn't quite the way it needed to be, so we had helped come up with some other language for that, and then we told him that we would help him try to get the bill passed. We thought it was a good thing, and so we started working with the legislators to try to educate them about this particular issue. And in the course of meeting with those legislators, had come up with some other things that would be necessary to have in the bill in order for it to get passed. So we've helped work on that as well.
Was there any thought about banning corporal punishment altogether? Advancing a bill that would just ban it altogether?
So there's a lot of people that would like to see that happen. Representative Powell being one of those. He had introduced legislation last year that would have banned it across the state, and when it was introduced in subcommittee for House Education, it didn't even get a second, so it didn't even get a hearing. So it was clear that Tennessee is not ready to move in that direction just yet, and many southern states are not. So if you look at across the country, the states that still allow corporal punishment, the southern states are still primarily the states that allow corporal punishment to some degree. And so he decided to step back. And then when this information came out that the Office of Civil Rights does at the federal level, that students with disabilities seem to be experiencing corporal punishment at a higher rate than students without disabilities, it was looking at it, maybe we should just start and see about that population first and see what people think about that.
So when you started looking into the numbers as far as corporal punishment, what did you find? You start kind of drilling down into whatever numbers we actually have, and what did you see as far as patterns?
Right. So it's important to know first that the data that we're looking at right now is voluntary data. So the school districts in Tennessee are not required to report data on corporal punishment, and so this is information that is collected at the federal level that is voluntary. And so that's the first piece. It's not everybody, so we only have a snapshot of the school districts that are reporting. And then I think the one thing that stands out is that students would, while the rate of corporal punishment overall for just students without disabilities is going down, the rate of corporal punishment for students with disabilities was going up or remaining steady. So you have a noticeable decrease for students without disabilities and an increase for students with disabilities. So I think that that piece of it was concerning. So I think that was what had people start looking at it more often. And then if you drill down to the comments that principals were making, disability is such a broad category, so then you start looking at, okay, well, we wouldn't do it if somebody had traumatic brain injury or if somebody had autism or somebody had emotional issues, but we do think it's okay if somebody has a speech language disorder or something else. And so it was interesting to see how people determine where it would be acceptable and where it wouldn't.
And it is interesting, I mean, what are the arguments for it? Let's go back to corporal punishment. The arguments for corporal punishment, and I guess that would apply, and that's why it was being used with disabled students. You know, why are they saying, okay, we need to do this?
So I don't think if the comments that I saw weren't specific to disability per se. It was more general, but one of the comments was that parents still want this as an option for their students because they didn't want students missing class and being suspended or having detention. Another issue was transportation, so they couldn't have their kids stay in detention after school because they had no way to get them home or to pick them up because they relied on the bus. So that wasn't an option for them. And there was even some reports in here that students preferred the corporal punishment because they didn't want to be missing class, so they'd rather get paddled and go back to class, which I found extremely interesting, that we're giving students the choice of which type of discipline they'd get. And I was very surprised at that because I know when I was a student we never had a choice of which discipline we would get. It was whatever the teacher thought was appropriate at that time. So I found that piece of it very interesting. A lot of the principals, on the other hand, said that they don't use corporal punishment at all, that they don't feel comfortable with it, that they feel like it's a liability issue, that they feel like they have more positive supports that are more effective. And so it was a real huge difference, I think, in the opinions of principals from one to another.
In this day and age, I am kind of surprised that it is in so many districts and something that is still used. You said the data that we have is all voluntarily reported.
Yes.
Do you get a sense how many kids a year are paddled in Tennessee?
I can pull up the data. I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head. It was not huge amounts of students that had it happened. And I think that the other thing that I noticed was that all of the school districts have policies on how many paddles you can, so you can only, I think the maximum was 4. Typically it was 1 or 2 times you would get paddled. Students would not be paddled more than twice in a school year. If they were, then there was other things that happened. Their paddling is not supposed to happen unless it's other less restrictive measures or less intrusive measures have been tried. So there's all these different things that fall into the data. But I mean, in terms of overall, it's surprising that it's happening at all. But I would say in terms of just the scope of how many students there are versus how many students are receiving corporal punishment, I don't think it's a huge number.
And one of the things that I believe was in the report that somebody said who supported it was this is a more immediate sort of message to the child. So the child has done something wrong, inappropriate, worthy of a disciplinary sort of action, and you could suspend them potentially or paddle them. Paddle them, the argument is more immediate.
And I guess immediate is up to debate, because to me immediate would be within seconds or at the most minutes, especially for a student with a disability, of something happening. And most of the school policies say that you still have to contact your school administrator or director or contact the parent first or something before you would actually administer the corporal punishment. And so it still wasn't immediate. It might be more immediate than a suspension or a detention, but there was still a significant lag time between the offense and the corporal punishment being imposed on the student. And so I found that argument interesting, given all of the steps that have to be taken before the paddling occurs.
When we talk about those steps, we are talking about, in most cases, they have to notify the parent. So it's not like Johnny messes up and Johnny is immediately paddled. They have to call the parent. They have to, I don't know what else they have to do, read the guidelines about what they can do here, but they have to call the parent, and the parent could opt out in most cases.
Yes.
Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the parents can opt out, and then a lot of the schools have something in place where they have to call either the superintendent or the director, if it's special education director, if it's special education. There has to be somebody higher up in the school system notified, and if it's the teacher, sometimes it's the principal that has the authority to do that, and sometimes in some schools it's only the principal that could actually administer the corporal punishment. So you've got an act that was maybe occurred in a classroom with a teacher, and it still has to go to that next level. So the immediacy is still not really quick.
But if parents could opt out, it means that in these cases where disabled children are being paddled, the parents agree to it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes and no. So not every school requires that parents be notified ahead of time, and so parents may not know that it's happening, and so in that case they may not know until after the fact that the paddling actually occurred, and then they might choose to opt out in the future if they weren't happy with that occurring. But not every single school requires that the parent be notified on the front end.
And all right, we're about to go to break, and kind of setting the table here, then we want to hear from you. Call in with questions, comments, or post them here on Facebook as we stream this live on our Facebook page, on the main Facebook page for Channel 5. Where is this bill now? What are your expectations for whether it will become law?
So right now it has passed the House Education. Actually, I apologize. It has passed the House entirely. So it's gone through the House Education Subcommittee, the House Education Full Committee, and it did pass, I believe, with only one no vote in the House, full House last week. And then in the Senate, it has passed the Senate Education Committee, and it is up in Senate Calendar Committee, I believe, this week, and then it would go to the floor on the Senate. And I think the other important piece to know is that the legislation was amended to include an opt-in option for family members. So if families, parents, legal guardians believe that corporal punishment is the best way to discipline their child, then they can put that in writing. It would go in the student's file, and that would be an option. So even if this ban occurs for students with disabilities, parents would still have an opt-in. So, which is still one layer of protection additional rather than an opt-out if you don't know that it's happening. So we're happy with that.
In the bill, they could say, you know what, we believe strongly in corporal punishment. We believe strongly it should be administered at school, so we opt in.
Yes. Even
for our disabled child.
Yes.
And so that was a critical component.
It was a very critical component. The House Education Committee members and I believe that the Tennessee General Assembly, for the most part, believe strongly in parent rights, and that the discipline starts at home, and that parents know best, and they want to see that carry over into the schools. And so they wanted to make sure that that option is there, and especially for students with disabilities, when you look to the parents to help develop their individual education plan and help develop the other components of that, they wanted to make sure that parents still had a voice in how their child was disciplined. And so they felt like it would be almost sending two different messages if they didn't allow that parent opt-in option for this, when they fight so much for parent rights and other aspects of that child's education.
All right, we're going to take a break now. We've kind of set the table. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We've been streaming this first portion on our News Channel 5 Facebook page. I will read some of the comments that are posted below, but we're going to end that stream and move it over to our News Channel 5 main page, our website. So you can watch there or just come on over to News Channel 5 Plus. Take a break, be back right after this.